Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I am Stephanie Wilson, and this is Freedom Over Fascism Live. And I have with me here Christopher Armitage, who has been writing on Substack for some time about how the states can really be helpful in trying to preserve freedom and democracy. And he calls it soft secession. So a couple things before we start. Today is Freedom Over Fascism's 100th episode. So, Chris, I thank you for being here for this big milestone. And I want to thank the rest of you, those who are listening, those who are watching, for sticking with me. And today we're going to be streaming on Substack, where most of you are, and also LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So we'll see if anybody joins us on those other places. All right, so Christopher Armitage is a researcher, a former law enforcement officer, a veteran, and an author. And I want to ask you, Chris, if you can sort of tell people who you are and why you started thinking about what the states can be doing and what your ideas really are, so that we can preserve what's left of our freedom, or get it back, but not in the same way, in a much better way.
Absolutely. So my background, I was a federal law enforcement officer for almost a decade. I also worked as a corrections officer for a short period. My master's degree is in Homeland Security. My undergrads are criminal justice and psychology. So I worked in those fields for a while, and then I moved over towards public policy and politics. And in each of the environments that I've worked in, I've had this real wish to change these systems from the inside, and felt the full weight of institutional pushback against meaningful, substantive change. And so eventually I ended up where I am now, which is somewhere between public policy advocate and journalist, and a couple other things you could probably throw out there. I consider myself almost like a science communicator, but with public policy. And
Right.
So soft secession is the main idea that I've been putting out there for a little bit now. Now, soft secession at its heart, it could be called federalism. That's what a lot of people have called it. It's actually a means of preserving the union, but using the state's power and strength that mostly blue states have, because I don't expect red states to really get on board with things that are going to change the status quo or prevent things from getting worse. It involves, one, aggressive prosecution for criminal behavior among the federal government and corruption at all levels. So that means right now we can't rely on the Department of Justice or the FBI or the fired inspector generals, the 17 fired inspector generals. We can't rely on these sources to police themselves anymore. And even SCOTUS has shown that they're purely partisan. They told Joe Biden he couldn't cancel student loan debt, but they told Donald Trump that he can enact tariffs and do whatever he wants. So if it's legal, it's an official act if a Republican does it, and it's an unofficial act if a Democrat does it. And so in that environment, a couple elections aren't going to change that alone. We already know that the enforcement mechanisms that would prevent red states from just deciding to not have elections, or just have elections as corrupt as Russia, which Texas is already in that range, actually, according to the European Union standards. That's not enough. So if we were the European Union at this point, at least Texas and maybe 3 or 4 other red states would actually lose their voting rights. They would not be allowed to engage in the management and leadership of our federal government any longer until they address the judicial corruption, the voter suppression, and the criminal activity among their leadership. That doesn't mean abandoning the people there. You know, when Hungary and Poland have lost their voting rights, it wasn't saying that the people in those places need to be abandoned. It was saying you cannot allow autocrats at the table of governance. So with soft secession, it's about, one, states' attorneys general taking charge of anti-corruption efforts at all levels and not passing things up to higher courts. Some of this is constitutional hardball. Some of it requires playing by the same playbook that Republicans have successfully implemented for a while, because they've been able to, with the anti-abortion activists. Well, they had a Supreme Court ruling saying, Roe v. Wade, saying that they lost. And they spent 50 years fighting back every way they could, even when they were told, hey, you can't pass this restriction against abortion. because it is unconstitutional. They said, okay, cool, we'll take it to court and we'll deal with it there. And they did that for 50 years until they won again. And so we need to fight with that same zealotry and tenacity for freedom and justice. And so that's the heart of soft secession. It's just empowering states to use the leverage we have in defense of freedom and justice.
So, when you say soft secession and empowering states, what exactly are you talking about? What are the things that states could be doing or are already doing that would curb the power of the federal government's uh, fascist policies?
So anti-corruption activity is number one, and number two is going to be creating parallel social safety nets. So we can expect that Medicare and Social Security are going to be gone, but even if they aren't, this still benefits the public. Each of the soft secession policies is a win, no matter how things shake out. So making sure that when Medicare and Social Security are taken away, or if they're taken away, that we have alternatives that can be coordinated between states or managed at the at one state level, that protects us and insulates us from not just the leverage that Republicans would use to continue their attempt at one party rule, but it would also protect our citizens and our residents from the damage that is being done. So anti-corruption, parallel social safety nets, and then using non-compliance strategically with federal law enforcement. So again, most of this comes from what Republicans have been doing for a while, which is when they had their own sanctuary communities for guns. And so they said, okay, well, we're just not going to enforce the gun control legislation in these communities. We're just not going to do it. And so that's just the third pillar. It's strategic noncompliance, anti-corruption, and protecting social safety nets. Nothing really too wild about that. To me, that seems like the rational path forward to addressing the problems that we're facing, rather than expecting these same broken systems to reform themselves. Because even if Democrats were to regain a substantial majority in the House and in the Senate, and take the White House, it seems Republicans have been so effective at obstructing and at doing the exact things I'm describing that we're not going to be able to have that system repair itself, or at least history indicates that we're not going to be able to.
Right. There's virtually no society that's gone fascist that has regained democracy without a war, civil
There
war,
isn't
international war.
not one example where fascists are elected democratically and removed democratically. It takes international pressure. It takes years of tenacious and persistent activist activity. It takes the military deciding that they want to do something, or powerful actors. You really don't topple autocrats who are willing to break any law to stay in power, because if they were to lose power, they would be held accountable. So if the incentive structure all lies in retaining the power that they already have by any means necessary. And so we need to look at alternatives for addressing the ill that we're facing.
So I I completely agree. When I think the term soft secession is, and we were talking about this right before we came on, um, definitely grabs attention. But I, for example, was talking to a source, my super secret source inside the Beltway, and I talked a little bit about tax revenue, which I would like for you to go into a bit. And when when we're done talking about that, I will give you the response, so we can talk through, what this actually means and how I very poorly stated it. So, when you're talking about keeping the social safety nets in the states that can, um, how, uh, so many questions. How would you fund that? There are a bunch of most all of the blue states give far more to the federal government than we get back, and we're not getting the services back that we're essentially, giving our tax dollars for, because this regime says, well, if you didn't vote for me, and you're kind of screwed, and even if you did vote for me, you're pretty screwed too. So, can you talk a little bit about that tax revenue and how you harness that in a way that is legal, doable, and doesn't seem to break up the compact between the federal government and the states?
Sure. Well, and I want to mention that the difference between legal and enforceable is an important distinction when addressing these situations because right now, the Trump administration has ignored over a third of all court orders over in 2025. The last decade, we have seen this massive erosion where Republican states understand the difference between enforceable and legal. And if we just always play by these rules and we never are willing to make that distinction for our convictions, then we just keep losing. We just keep losing. We do not get to win against fascism. So, if somebody cares more about being an institutionalist than about the well being and safety of human lives, then I don't want them running things. And that's the playbook that has been operated from by Republicans, because to them, they say, okay, abortion is murder. So everything is justified to stop murder. And while I disagree with that, if we're not willing to fight to that same level to stop genocide or to stop people not having health care because we need health care or we die, people not having education, people not having freedom of speech, so these freedoms that our nation was founded on. If you'd rather be authoritarian than just say, okay, we're going to break some rules, but every step of the way we're going to obstruct and we're going to say, take us to court, and if you win in court, then make us do what you want. And when you can make us do what you want, but we're going to make us do what you want. And then we're just going to tweak that rule slightly and we're going to try it again. That's the playbook that got Republicans as much power as they have now. Now, funding the there's two things. One, funding those parallel social safety nets that primarily comes from non-tax revenue streams. That means municipal broadband. That means the state being a healthcare provider, because that can be a non-tax revenue stream. Public banking is another great example of a non-tax revenue stream that benefits the public, provides better services than they're getting from the private sector, and brings in money to fund social safety nets. That is a soft secession policy, and I think any blue state would say, yeah, we'd rather have our governor managing X, Y, and Z than Donald Trump or anyone the Republicans would give us. Now, as far as the tax withholding, that's the big policy. It gets some people riled up. So the idea is, so this is actually a policy that was proposed by Republicans in multiple state legislatures during the Obama administration. So they already tried to do this and failed. And you can argue they were serious or they weren't. But the point was, at least performatively, they said Obama's a tyrant. And so we're going to try and withhold our tax dollars, stop them from going to the federal government, because we believe the federal government is committing immoral, unjust, unconstitutional, you name it, acts. So the way it
Well,
works
too bad
is
for them, they didn't really have the money. But anyway, go ahead.
very true. Well, it's all performative. Everything for them is a
Yeah.
performance. And so for the what states would do is they would instruct all employers to, instead of sending their with tax withholdings to the federal government, they send it to a state managed escrow account. And that escrow account, that money can be sent to the federal government, but the federal government needs to comply with anti-corruption policies. They need to have an audit to make sure that they're not misallocating or misusing or abusing our tax dollars, because we know right now that the Trump administration is lining their pocket with our tax dollars, that they are not giving us funds that they're supposed to be giving us, and the corrupted courts are not making them do it. So if the courts aren't going to make them follow the law, and the federal law enforcement officers who work for them, they've already purged, if our only loyalists, if nobody's going to make them follow the rules, then are we just going to lie down and accept that this is what it is? No, we have a mechanism for saying we're going to have companies send this money elsewhere, and you can have it. And we just want a completely fair and just audit to make sure that you're not unduly enriching yourselves or misappropriating the funds that we're sending. We'd love to, and also there can even be back and forth. We can have negotiations. Okay, so we will give you, if you're going to show us this amount of money is going exactly to this thing it was appropriated for, we will release it from the escrow. And we can do that with every single thing. But if you don't fight, then you always lose. And so we need to be willing to fight. And sometimes we're going to lose. But if you're fighting, you are winning.
So I think a lot of us here, kind of in the Substack community where we are doing a lot of our talking, completely agree with that. I I just want to step back a second and fill in some of the blanks so that we're sort of going in a straight line. So when you say anti-corruption um, methods or this anti-corruption policy, what do you mean by that?
So a good start would be hiring back every single inspector general. Also, they've defunded the ethics compliance office. So we need to bring back the ethics compliance and legal safeguards that actually investigated and let the public know and had enforcement mechanisms when they discovered corruption. That's probably the biggest one we could really have, is they've just dismantled our ability to tell if they're just nakedly lining their own pockets. There's 17 inspector generals. We need to bring them back, and we need to give them stronger teeth. We need to say, not only are you going to bring them back, but we will hand this money over to you. Now, part of this negotiation is to say, if we start rolling the ball on this, then they might come to the table and say, you know what, we don't want this to go as far as it could. How about you just tell us what you want? We'll hire them back, and then we're good. We have an ethics office that's fully funded. We have inspector generals. We have also, we need to be able to bring back people who were let go for political reasons, because they've been purging the federal government of people who aren't explicitly loyal to the Trump administration. We cannot trust you with our resources if you're going to abuse them and use them to harm us. That's just not acceptable.
So are you imagining that the regime itself might replace these inspectors general with nonpartisan?
Well, I think the states would have to be the ones to do that. That's what it would require, is we're going to pick the
So
17. Yeah, go ahead.
that's my question. Is it Congress? Is it the regime? Is it how would that work?
I would say it'd have to be the states that are actually negotiating it would be part of that process, and need to be an agreement that we need to pick people who we can consent and approve of their ability to do this job effectively, because we can no longer trust the corrupted federal government to choose its own hires. And so we can present people who we help, but it wouldn't be Congress either. I think it would have to be the states. I think it'd have to be governors or attorneys general, and there'd have to be consensus on that and an agreement that these are truly not just in the Merrick Garland sense, where they were allowed to draw an investigation out for 4 years. There need to be people who have a sense of urgency, because fascists, due to their willingness to break any rule, they're very agile. They move quickly. And so if our response to fascism isn't equally as agile and equally as willing to use every resource at hand to achieve our means, then we just lose.
That makes a lot of sense. Before I go further, I'd like to encourage everybody who's here to subscribe to both of us. A paid subscription if you can manage it. Uh, just wanted to and press the hearts on the chat, because that will help this get higher on the algorithm. Hearts, please. Hearts, hearts, hearts. Okay, great. Let me see if I can do it on this. See, you guys could do it too. Uh, so negotiations between the states and the feds. When you say you would, or you think that the states would create their own safety nets, how? Okay, are you envisioning groups of states? I know that there's this um, sort of, I don't know whether it's underground or just small, group that wants to be the Republic of New England and probably Cascadia as well. Like, do you think it would be groups of states or individual states, and how would they fund it, do you think?
So ideally, we're able at the state level to just implement a policy like a truly state-run healthcare option, and it's up to the residents. I'm a universal healthcare guy, universal single payer, but the point is just let that state come to the solution where it's at and where its voters are at, and
Hmm.
then build that infrastructure, fund it with non-tax revenue. It itself can be a non-tax revenue source as well. A universal healthcare system could fund itself just by replacing the things that we're already wasting more money on, rather than something that's effective and takes away a lot of the bureaucracy. That also can very easily involve working with other states to negotiate for drug prices or to offer care. Like, hey, if you're Californian, you go anywhere, Oregon, Washington State, New York, all these states, this healthcare card you have, we're going to take care of you. No bureaucracy. You just show us your driver's license that shows us you're a California resident. And when you're in Washington State, you just walk in. You're not going to have to deal with any unnecessary stuff. You're just going to go in and get treated. And that leaves room for every state to create that patchwork of what works for them. And to me, it I know it would feel great to see some actual progress on these social issues and safety net problems that we've been dealing with as a nation, because we've been fighting the Republicans and they're doing everything they can to stop us from moving forward. So if we can have some ambition in our policy making at the state level with things like universal health care, municipal broadband, a replacement for social security that can be some sort of an agreement or compact between different states, we can just actually solve the problems that Americans are stressed out about.
So that sounds great. And we know that universal healthcare could work because we have 4 different systems in the United States, as I like to remind people, 4 different healthcare systems. We've got the VA, which you're affiliated with. You've got Medicare, which I have. We've got uh, the employment based uh, insurance and the ACA. So it's not like we've never done this before. We're already doing it with the VA and sort of similar with Medicare. So
Well, and also there's TRICARE, which the military has, and TRICARE, there's no billing. You just walk in there, you show them your ID, and they do everything all in one place. It's amazing how much bureaucracy they're able to pull out of the system and how much more efficient they're able to be. So TRICARE is kind of a gold standard for like a universal single payer type situation. And even in different cities like San Francisco has a public hospital. There's places in the United States that are models and small versions of what we need to be doing. Also, pretty much every other country on earth, or at least every developed country, is doing this effectively. And so it's like, but here's the thing: when I sit down with a governor, they agree with everything you and I are saying. We need the political will. We need the willingness to just actually say, you know what? We're not going to make excuses. We're just going to do this for the people in our state.
so have you sat down with governors and attorneys general or even state legislators and talked this through with any of them? And what's their response?
Most of my contact has been with mayors and with state legislatures and with city council members. I am probably about 2 degrees of separation from several governors, and have been told that they are familiar with my work and that they're receptive to these ideas. But at every single level, the people that I speak to just say that they need to see more public consensus, and that either things need to get way worse, where it's the only option, and by then it probably is too late, but or there's the public consensus and the public drive saying we're going to either reward you for doing what needs to be done, or there is going to be a serious political cost to not doing this. That's what will influence their behavior, and they say that because right now they're listening to the sources that help them get elected or reelected, because that's just the math that gets you there. You don't get to hold office unless you're constantly saying, does this move me closer to the reelection or further? And so we
Which
aren't
means
factored.
talking to donors. I mean, it all comes back to the money and politics. So,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's who, office holders talk to most, I think, is their donors rather than their constituents.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna try to get Maura Healey on here. So if anybody knows Maura Healey or anyone in her office, please DM me. But I see her in other places. So and she lives in the town next to me, so I feel like there's a chance in the new year. But, and I feel like she's doing some of it, although the money for it, she's trying to, make sure that Massachusetts residents had the SNAP benefits and have the Medicare, but without federal money, it's hard. So, um, so when I talk to my super secret inside the Beltway source, and I'm telling you that I didn't tell him very well about what your thoughts were. So I did a much worse job of representing your idea uh, than you do, but I'll be better now. Um, so this was the response. Withholding tax revenue breaks the fundamental compact between the federal government and the states. But just as bad, it's bad politics because it gives Trump a winning hand and puts any state that does this in near rebellion, and he can use the power of the federal government to bring them to heel. Not even close to a winning hand. It's illegal and would never be effective. I get that some folks want to burn it all down, but this would be counterproductive. So, and then he goes on to talk about, like, we have to focus on winning the Congress in 26. And that's
Yeah.
basically it. But um what and I realized that you're not exactly the way I had put it. It was much more about the withholding of funds, and I got it wrong. So let's just, put it out there that I explained it poorly, but this is still, I think, would be a reaction of institutionalists. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I want to say this person you spoke to, we're on the same team. The team that's trying to defend America and protect freedom and fight back against fascism. It also sounds like they're not really picking up the idea that, you know, does anyone watching this doubt that Trump will do absolutely everything possible, illegal, immoral, anything to retain power? Now, he is the one running a federal government where the Supreme Court has given him a free pass. Republicans have not. You can guess all you want, but there isn't a single time where Republicans have actually held him to task. There is not a substantive time where they said no. He has 34 felonies. He was impeached twice but not convicted. He has said horrific things. He's done horrific things. He's taken away the powers of the purse string. Congress allowed that to happen. The Republican Party is complicit. The Supreme Court is complicit. The federal government has been purged. They've fired inspectors generals. They defunded the ethics office. The mechanisms for protecting our democracy have been removed. And every single state run by a Republican is complicit and party to being willing to do anything it takes to retain the power they have and expand it. That's our starting point. That's where we are now. So in
Right.
that game that we're in, we need to be willing to use any tools accessible. Holding money in an escrow account, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But in negotiation, you need to be willing to maybe make a bold claim and say, we will follow through with it. But why don't we have a conversation first that helps prevent it? Because
Right.
we need to be willing to put them on their back heels. This is something Republicans already tried and failed at under the Obama administration. They weren't afraid to do it because their convictions said what they were doing was right. Now, moving money to an escrow account, creating negotiations back and forth for what we will fund and what we won't until we can get absolute certainty through an audit or through compliance that our funds aren't going to be misappropriated is reasonable. But also, let's try it, do it, and they can make us follow the rules if they want us to. At every level, when you're dealing with fascism, you need to be willing to say, no, we're not going to help you. We're going to do everything we can to stop you from doing what you want to do. And if you want to make us help you, then you're actually going to have to make us help you. You're going to have to find the mechanisms to do it through the court system, through legal mechanisms, and you're going to have to get that to happen. It maybe happens right away, and maybe it doesn't. But as soon as you try that, we're going to find another tactic, and we're going to find another one, and we're going to keep finding ways to push back because what you're doing is wrong and it's immoral. We have people in the streets arresting and beating and kidnapping people without warrants because of the color of their skin. The Supreme Court said that's legal now. What mechanism shouldn't we use? Also, if
Exactly, and it
anybody,
doesn't
hold
really
on.
matter, like, this regime has proven that they don't need an excuse to go into anywhere with the military,
Yeah.
and the National Guard and, ICE, and who knows how many of them actually work for the government or are just, like, cosplaying so that they can, get their kicks and grins, but if they wanted to, they could sign up and get a really big bonus, and the result would be the same. Um,
The experts on authoritarianism and on, the rise of authoritarian regimes, it's not highly debated among them. It's kind of like climate change among climate scientists. They say the United States has crossed that barrier, and we are
mhm,
now in the aggregation of the consolidation of power. If we wait until the 2026 midterms, does anybody think that the Trump administration is pulling punches or Republicans are pulling punches? No, they will do anything and everything. Two, next year they're going to be hiring a lot more ICE agents, and they're going to send them to polling places, and they're going to instruct. They pardoned 1,500 people who invaded the capital of our nation. They pardoned
right.
those people. Now there's going to be 10 times as many of them if a Democrat wins. We need to be fighting now, and if we're wrong, if I'm wrong, if we're wrong, well then cool. The elections just go well, and we don't have to sweat it.
Right. And also, my um my listeners know this, but not everyone does. So, and I'm sure I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but in the military, um, in your last, what is it, 6 months, you can like go on a different course, as I understand it, and they are funneling those people into ICE when
Yeah.
they're almost done with their enlistment. Um, and they have this site that is hiring for various levels and showing the various salaries, um, and the bonuses that you would get if you came. So, as you were saying, we got 1,500 plus a very large pipeline of Nazis, um, like real Nazis that is coming behind them as the young Republicans come up, as we've seen from those
Yeah.
texts and what we've seen from uh, Tucker Carlson platforming Fuentes, um, and from you know all of all the actions that they've taken. So, so where do you start? Um, wh- where how do we like get this into motion?
Yeah, the answer actually is really I'm about to release a new book called Toppling Tyrants, and it covers a lot of the stuff that I advocate for right now, but condensed and where it was repetitive and expanded were helpful. But it's a four-part strategy that I think is going to be it's historically backed. A lot of it's based on Eric Chenoweth's work about combating fascism and the tactics that actually work, and a few other experts. And so the four stages, as I see it, if we want to win and fight back, are educate. We learn about the actual policies, tools, and tactics that are going to win. Activate, which is that doesn't mean start an organization. You can join an organization, but in my experience, there is a lot of these activist organizations are 95% back end bureaucracy, 5% actual action. And if that action isn't perfect in its effectiveness, then it's partially wasted energy. So I advocate a lot for decentralized and distributed activism. That means you learn what's going to work, and then you start contacting people's high dollar donors to take them to task and say wasn't our representative doing X, Y, or Z, or why are they doing A, B, or C, or also
Oh wait, let me
regular.
pause you on that right now.
Mhm.
So, talk a little bit about calling the donors of the representatives. I've heard you expand on that on another podcast. Um, and I'd like you to talk about that because that's not one of the tactics that's usually in, like, you call your representatives, or you show up at a protest, or you talk to, you amplify correct messaging. So, what is this calling the donors up thing?
So almost every state and the federal government have public disclosure that makes it legal for you to look up the information for people who have donated to political candidates and campaigns. So you can look up that publicly available information. You can get their address, you can get their name, you can get how much money they've contributed, you can get their phone number, you can get their email address, and you can call the people who fund your politicians. Red state, blue state, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. You can call those high dollar donors, and it is 100% legal. It's not, now you're not allowed to tell them to vote for somebody else or to raise money for somebody else. But what you can do is say, I saw that you donated $6,000 to Ted Cruz. How do you feel about him voting to cut SNAP benefits or cut Medicaid? Or, well, okay, so you're saying that he didn't do that, but actually I have the exact bill right here on the vote. I could read the bill to you if you want, because I think this is important. And I see here that you work for this company, and I'm just wondering, is this something that your company is aligned with or that you're aligned with? Are you okay with your community doing this? And then what happens is, I mean, they might yell at you, or they might be nice, or they might pretend like, whoa, I had no idea. But you do that to a bunch of high dollar donors, and then they call that representative. Then Ted Cruz gets calls from all the people who've given him thousands and thousands of dollars, maybe totaling $500,000 over a couple of cycles. And he has a bad day. Maybe he has a bad week. Maybe it goes far enough where he needs to put out a statement. I think it's the single
Maybe it
most
goes
effective.
far enough where he has to go to Cancun, you know.
Yeah. So that's that.
Um, somebody in the chat says, how about boycotting the corporate donors?
Love that. Absolutely. And that's so much of what I advocate for is this distributed activism model. And what it is about is empowering everybody to do as much as they can that is actively engaging in nudges against the system. Rather than meeting up, electing a board of directors and deciding when we can have meetings that works for everybody and creating our bylaws and opening a bank account, deciding what our name is going to be and a million other things. Boycott. If that's what you believe in, if that's what you care about, whatever your issue is, boycott that company, shout it out on social media, tell everybody you're doing, talking about it regularly, try to get other people to join in. And it's about all the time. So that rolls into number 3. So number 1 in the 4-step process is educate. Number 2, activate. Boycotting, completely adequate activation. Great way to make a difference. If you can cost people money or ruin their day or take their attention, that is winning. That is imposing a cost upon them. And if enough people do that, it will influence their behavior. Because that's what all of this is about influencing the behavior of individuals and organizations as a whole. So educate, activate, replicate. So when you're posting on social media, when you're telling your friends, when you're talking to strangers, go ahead, talk to strangers and tell them about these things you care about. That allows that distributed activism to spread and to grow and to create community and culture. And that's what we need, because we're not going to be able to beat fascism in one protest. It's going to take sustained efforts over years, persistently, multiple times per week. You're doing the thing. Every day you're doing the thing. Millions of people doing the things. And then these nudges become shoves. Every one of us can be a little nudge, and you do enough of those, or even, to use another metaphor, it's like drops of rain. We're all these activist drops of rain, and we're wearing away at the stone that is this fascist facade. And so it's educate, activate, recruit, repeat. And we just build a culture around doing that. We need to get more people to care. We need to have good attitudes about it. We need to keep showing up, not until we just to defeat this fascism, but even after, because they're not going to stop. Bad actors are always going to show up and try to hurt those that they don't like.
Um, Before we go further, I completely agree, and I want to talk about the Black Friday, uh, what do you call it, boycott that talk about. My computer has told me that your phone is at less than 20%, and
I'll be
that
okay.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Um, so, in the socials, and I'm not on Twitter anymore, and that's another conversation that needs to be had by lots of people. Uh, but there's a movement to boycott the big retailers from Black Friday to Cyber Monday, right? So Amazon, Target, Walmart, Home Depot, and to shop local, um, and to build up the local businesses, particularly Black-owned businesses, where you are if you're going to be buying things. Um, okay, looking out for each other's phones. That's how we take care of people. Heart. That's my husband watching from upstairs. He's so sweet. Anyway, so okay, we've got educate, activate, elevate, and repeat.
Yeah.
Um, what other kinds of things? So with the activation, you talked a lot about like being a cog in the like putting sand in the wheels or something, doing little things to slow things down.
Yeah.
What are the kinds of things that we can do as individuals or individuals who are working together to just slow down, to slow the roll,
Yeah. Well, and
make it harder?
so the three principles that govern a lot of biological change, and I think extends to the group, not just the individual, are frequency, duration, and intensity. And so a small action that you can do every day is just choosing not to to purchase anything from an organization that is actively anti-union. And not just that, but go on social media and maybe just send a tweet at them every day or a message every day. Post on Starbucks's page. Another day of not shopping or not going to Starbucks for my coffee because it's bad and they're anti-union and you can only
Right.
be you keep so yeah, that's just that little thing. You knew that. Now frequency, that means that's a small intensity. Do it frequently and do it for a long
Mhm.
duration. Do it for a long period of time. And then, of course, if other people are doing it, awesome. And then there's
Yeah.
bigger things
We
like
we're not doing Starbucks in this house.
good, 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 good.
So
And so, and then you say, okay, well, we're just focusing on Starbucks for the next month. Just every day when I don't buy their cup of coffee, I'm going to go on a different social media platform and troll them about it. And then another way, another now a more intense action is if somebody, and I'm not advocating for anybody to break the law, but I'm just saying when you need to file any paperwork or even if it's your taxes, you can request extensions on your taxes. You can file the forms asking for extensions, and then you're avoiding engaging with that as much as possible. You file forms with the government for everything you can at the federal level just to gum up the works and slow them down a little bit. Or, I mean, another good one is just contacting your attorney general on a different platform 3 days a week, 5 days a week. I try to think of behavior modification and how we can apply it to ourselves. So that frequency, intensity, duration principle, I want people, I think we're going to get the best bang for our buck if we focus on small intensity frequently over long periods of time. So 3 to 5 days a week, you message your attorney general on a different platform and you just say, like, look, that there's people in the federal government who are committing crimes, criminal activity. Are you opening investigations into this when we know that there's people in the Trump administration who are taking briefcases full of money right now? I would bet everything in the whole wide world that briefcases full of money are getting passed around. And so, why aren't our attorney generals launching investigation? And they shouldn't pass it up. You cannot pass it up to federal authorities when you know that they're complicit and they're owned and they're working off of loyalty to Trump and Republicans rather than loyal to the public and to their commitment to the American people. Um, so find those little activities.
that brings me to this is really nicely segued into the video that several Congresspeople made about, and then several people on Substack who are veterans made about, not following illegal orders. And next week I'm having the legal director of the Orders Project on, because apparently a lot of service people are calling them to find out what's legal and what's not. Um, so um, I'm not sure where I was going with this. I'm sorry. So how does that fit in terms of making sure that we're doing everything legally, often, sustainably to gum up the works?
Well, and those service members, I served in the U.S. Air Force for almost a decade, and knew some really honorable people there, and really saw really strong ethics training being applied, and I think that that resonated with a lot of folks. And so, with how that can relate to it is we can make it very clear. We can even pass laws or state level orders that say if you are a service member or a member of the federal government, and we're going to give you whistleblower protection at the state level. We will give you, our attorney's general office is at your disposal, at your defense. We're not going to let you end up in Guantanamo Bay. None of that. We will do everything it takes to make sure that you're safe if you refuse unlawful orders or if you whistleblow on bad things that are going on. Because honestly, historically, whistleblowers and people who refuse unlawful orders, things don't work out great for them. They just don't. Edward Snowden is one example. There's a lot of folks, they just, even after the wars or the bad times, whistleblowers are often forgotten and they still
I
end
think
up
the Edward
suffering.
Snowden case might be a little bit more,
There's more to it.
debatable. Yeah.
Very fair, yeah. But, it's still, there's a lot of examples historically of whistleblowers and people refusing lawful orders against fascist regimes not being taken care of. Now we have this governance style where we have these states that do have a lot of power and authority. And so why aren't governors, why shouldn't they go out and make a commitment? If you're a service member and you're going to stand up and you're going to refuse an unlawful order, we are going to defend you. We are going to protect you, because you can't count on anyone who works for this administration to be an advocate for what is right or what is moral or for what the public deserves. They're always going to advocate for whatever Donald Trump wants.
Um, so we're reaching the top of the hour. And in a second, I want to ask you to tell people where they can find you. But just to recap, we're talking about doing anything possible to gum up the works, small sustained actions over a long period of time, iteration, attorneys general, suing whenever possible, um, governors creating or states creating somewhat parallel systems. Um, is there anything else that you feel like you've left out that people should know about before we?
Hmm. You know, I really, more than a specific policy or anything like that, I just want to say the best tool that we have for fighting fascism, in my opinion, the most impactful one, is electing people at the lowest levels possible. Your dog catcher up to your city council member, up to your county commissioner, up to your mayor. Get to know those people and fight to have people who are ready to do whatever it takes to take care of that city, to have ambitious policy that's going to improve the lives of their constituents. If you want to fight back against fascism, America has some things that work, and those things are the local level. And so, fight for that. Get involved at the local level. Don't expect any federal election to save us. Maybe it will, but don't bet on it. Just focus that energy on the local and how we can improve the lives of the people in our community.
Right, that sounds awesome. So, how do people find you, find your book, find your um, more about you, as your history and your policy? You know what? Before with that, I ask everybody that uh, who comes on after the fascism, if we get to it, we will at some point get to a point, it may be 50 years from now, where we're building something new. What is the most radically create? And then you've come up with a ton of radically creative ideas, but let's assume all of the things you've already said are implemented. What would the most radically creative idea you would have to that you would put forward in a rebuilding time?
Oh goodness. Well, I
And
mean,
your excuse because you came up with so many already. But I'm just
no, I love this.
was
It's just
wondering if you.
I could write a whole book answering this question, and maybe someday I will. I mean, of course, there's like the anti-corruption stuff that would be amazing, but I'm going to take this as an opportunity to talk about something I never ever get to talk about. I have this vision where, as we continue to advance technologically, we have less need for labor, and eventually we live in a world, maybe 50 years from now, whenever it is, where the work of the government is to give people as much free time and resources as possible. And in that world where maybe we don't need to work, in that post-work world, I would love to see a system where money would still exist, but how it would be applied would be, so there's free education for anything you want to go to school for. Because even though we have robots or computers that can do it, learning has value. Having skills has value. So how do you have an incentive structure for that beyond just curiosity, which might just be enough? But what you could do is have a universal basic income. But then it's like, okay, if you want to go get a degree in engineering, then you're going to go get that for free. And once you complete it, we're going to increase your basic income and you're going to get more. And then, okay, well, now you finished your engineering degree. You want to go get a mathematics degree. Great. Or you want to go learn how to be a plumber, even though we don't really need plumbers, but you want the skill set. Awesome. And every time you get more education, you get more money added to your basic income. And that's my utopia right there.
Let me just add to that. Is not just the ability to go get more education, it's the ability to be creative and to create art
Yeah,
and new ideas. Okay.
absolutely.
So, how do people find you? This is your
You know,
chance to plug all of your
plug bowl.
stuff.
You can check out the existentialistrepublic.com. You could go on Substack and look up the Existentialist Republic. And we are starting a YouTube channel. We haven't dropped content yet, but I think the channel is actually live. We actually just filmed a ton of stuff last night, so I'm pretty excited for that to get out there. But really, just look up the Existentialist Republic on Substack. That's my bread and butter. That's where I like to get a hold of people, and we're growing out beyond just me to really be a network over the next few months that just is bigger. I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about ideas, public policy, community advocacy. So the Existentialist Republic on Substack, that's the move.
All right, that sounds great. And I have run into and become part of a number of different communities on Substack and outside of Substack, really. And I think the forming of communities and the forming of networks to amplify all of our voices is something that's really important. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. Um, and everybody, you can find me at freedomoverfascism.us. Please, if you can afford it. See, Chris has got enough paid subscribers that he can maybe hire people, but I do not. So if you want to help feed my family in the new year, please subscribe or buy me a coffee. I just put up that link. Um, so everybody, thank you so much for being here. And Chris, I really, really appreciate this conversation. I think not enough people talk about concrete action that we can take as individuals or groups or states. You know, you've got it at every single level. So um, I think that's really important to tell people what they can do, a small action that they can take that's not too overwhelming. It's like not committing to be in DC every week for, months, but it's, making a phone call or not having a Starbucks or whatever. I think that's really helpful. So I want to thank you. And I would thank all of you who came, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you for
All
having me.
right.